Hello, thanks for tuning in. I normally do a conversion story once every week. I decided to do something a little bit different. Basically, two Christian ministers talking to each other. There will be something about a conversion. This is Stephen Colbert. I've never heard of him. I understand that he's been in politics. He's a TV personality, and he's also an ordained minister for a multi-faith church. He's a practicing Roman Catholic. He claims that he was an atheist, that he converted to Catholicism. And I've done a bit of research on him. He was brought up in a Catholic family. Yeah, I mean, he can claim that he was an atheist. Maybe he was brought up a Catholic and lost his faith and then came back to it, but it's not like he was a sort of hardcore long-term atheist. But let's have a listen to them. And I'm just interested in what Christians talk about with each other, and we'll see. I'll make some comments along the way. I've not watched this video, so let's see how it goes. He's talking to Father James Martin on a channel called America the Jesuit Review. So, well, let's have a listen.
But right after the election last year, I walked out the next week, or maybe the next day, to do the show after Election Day, and I realized how happy I was to be there, because what I needed was a sense of community and people who agreed with me that this was crazy, and that we're not crazy for thinking that something's wrong. Like, what do you want to be? Not alone.
Yeah.
And people say, what is the success of one of these shows? And I think,
Yeah, did you know what he said there? This keeps coming back time and time again. What they need is a sense of community, knowing that there are other people who share the same view as you. Because obviously we live in a pluralistic world, and more often than not, you'll find yourself disagreeing, you'll find yourself challenged by other points of view, and it's nice to anchor yourself in a community where other people are reading from the same song sheet. I absolutely get that. It's one of the advantages of being in a religion, that you're with everybody that's got the same worldview as you, and more or less will probably agree on a lot of issues the same as you do. Okay, let's keep going.
you're being gaslighted by people who are heretics against reality, is what I've called them. Is that I was taught, like, heresy was the worst sin, because not only are you sinning, but you're seducing other people into your sinful ways.
Right.
That's why, in the Inferno, the heretics are in red hot iron coffins in the city of Dis.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. People who do not care about truth, the people call it post-truth. I talked about truthiness a lot on the old show, meaning that which you feel to be true regardless of what the facts would support, which is a common political thing that we just gave a name to. But now we've moved into something new, which is you're indifferent as to what the truth is. You just name a truth, even if it has no relationship to the fact, and you can name it differently the next day.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, of course, we've seen that phenomena. We've seen it a lot with people who will disregard the facts. And I may have been guilty of that myself on some occasions, simply through confirmation bias, wanting to believe in a particular point of view, or wanting to believe something despite what the facts are saying. All I would say is that this is a Christian talking, and I would say that he's doing exactly that with his belief in God and Jesus.
It's a far greater and far more, I think, malicious, because it is purely selfish, unmooring from reality. And so that's why I think that our leaders in Washington right now, specifically those who are supporting the president, who should know better, are heretics against reality, because they're trying to convince you that you're wrong, that this is normal.
Yeah, and there's a reason why they call Satan the Prince of Lies. I mean, it all starts from that. It all starts from that inability to name truth.
Lies or PR. Prince of PR sounds a little better.
Now, you brought up sort of the moral, theological questions. You have a lot of Catholicism in the new show. I shouldn't say new.
I mean, it's 2+ years
Yeah,
old.
Midnight Confessions and talking to God.
That's
I was
right.
curious, was that hard to convince the network of, or were they that you?
They mostly leave us alone. If God doesn't come on and say don't eat McDonald's, I think we're fine.
Yeah, the reason they leave him alone is that he probably draws in huge ratings. That's why.
Has God said that to you in any sort of prayer experiences you've had, or
No,
not yet?
no,
Yeah, God would
no,
never say something like
no. Go for the fillet of fish in
that.
Lent. That's the
Right,
only
right.
thing he said. Only thing he said.
Speaking of which, let's
Yes.
talk a little bit about your faith, which you've not been embarrassed to talk about. I'm not going to ask too
No,
personal questions.
I'm embarrassed by the limitations of my ability to talk about it, but that's about it.
Who is God for you?
So that's interesting. He's saying he's embarrassed by his the limitations of his ability to talk about it. It's almost like he's getting ready to be embarrassed by the case that he's going to make for his faith.
You mentioned fillet of fish, and
Fillet of fish. You got that.
who is God?
Who
for
is
you?
God?
Yeah, like when you think about God, what's your image? People have different images.
Now this is interesting. Let's listen.
Christ. It's Jesus. It's not. It's
So
not
you're-
the beard.
okay.
It's not the old man with
Right.
the beard. It's not the Old Testament God. It's Jesus. But it flashes. As soon as I imagine God, if you're really looking for literal imagery, like
Sure,
what I think of when I
yeah.
think of God, I think of Jesus, and then that image dissolves because I then try to subsume that single image into the Trinity,
Okay.
and then
Well, that's the problem with Christianity, isn't it? It saddles you with the Trinity. At least Islam hasn't got that problem. You don't have to think of Muhammad, and then Muhammad dissolves, and then you've got the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So yeah, that's a problem because the Trinity really, I suppose, is right at the heart of Christianity. Without the Trinity, Christianity might be just any other sort of monotheistic religion. And at the same time, the Trinity is just something so absurd. A tripartite God is just even more unbelievable than a purely singular God.
it just becomes a bit of like one of those amorphous all creatures made of pure energy from Star
Yeah.
Trek.
Which is fine.
Yeah, so in other words, it becomes what we find from so many Christians when you ask them, what is God, describe God, they usually use very nebulous kind of a sort of language which really doesn't go towards defining anything at all. And we end up with, I mean, he started off saying, well, when I think of God, I think of Jesus. Well, what's Jesus? You think of this man, usually a white man, by the way, with a sort of beard and with a really wise look on his face, and then that dissolves, and then he imagines the Trinity. What does he imagine about the Trinity exactly? What does he see, or what does he imagine it is? It's just so abstract. And they say, oh, I walked with Jesus, or the Holy Spirit spoke to me, uttered the word, etc., etc. It's all just very. It's nothing like I went to my neighbor came to me and asked if my neighbor asked if I could if he could help me, with my garden because he could see that the weeds are overgrown. I haven't been feeling well. It's nothing. It's nothing like that kind of real relationship. It's a fake relationship because there seems to be nobody there. You're just inventing somebody.
It's like there's a trick. I often try to convince myself.
Right, you heard him, and this is what a lot of Christians do. You heard him say, I often try to convince myself. And that's what you've got to do when you've been suckered into a religion. You've always got to convince yourself that something is true, despite the facts. That's what he was criticizing others in a political context, and he's doing it the same in a theological context.
That the world is different than it is in this way. Here's a strange thing. I used to do this exercise all the time when I was younger. Let's say I'm at a cafeteria in college. I'd pick up a piece of broccoli and hold it up. And then I would look at it and I would suspend my knowledge that if I let go, it goes this way. And to see whether I don't know which way it would go. That maybe even convince myself it would go that way, and I would let go, and if it will fall down, and if I thought it was funny that it went down, I'd go like, oh, I did it. I managed to suspend my gravitocentric view of my existence that gravity would take it down that way. I feel this.
Yeah, he's convinced himself that that's the case. It's like, me holding this and me convincing myself the case. Well, there's no reason why it should go down. Let's just imagine that it could go up, it could go to the side. That's just lying to yourself.
Same way when I try to imagine God. Like when I pray, my habitual prayer is...
So he's inviting himself. It's like when you pick up a novel, you you put yourself into a suspension of disbelief. You're not going to disbelieve what's happening. You're going to trust the narrative. And it's the same in Christianity. You agree with yourself to suspend your disbelief. In other words, you know that you haven't got good reason to believe any of this, but you're going to pretend it's true.
Is among whatever intentions I may have in my prayer or what I might offer up, I always ask for the ability to love, because then if I can love, I'll be free. And as I love you, Lord, let this be. That's sort of how I end it.
Well, some very nice sound bites, but they don't really amount to much. I mean, this whole thing about love. I'm not for Christian love. I'm not for universal love. I'm not going to be coerced by any religion into loving universally everybody, my enemies and all my neighbors, etc. Love is a very special thing, and it's special precisely because it's so rare in the sense that you only love a few people, your friends, your family, special people in your life. To expect human beings to have universal love is just completely unrealistic. And he looks uncomfortable talking about it because you can say it, but you won't feel it.
Every prayer, like after communion.
Okay.
And when I think of love, I think of God. Love is the every only God who
Here we
breathes.
are. We hear this so many times. What is God to you? Well, God is love. Okay, well, I've got love, but why call it God? I just call it love. It's an emotion that I feel. Why do you have to put the God label on it? And there's no good reason.
This world so glad and big that even a thing all small and sad, man, may his mighty briefness dig.
Who is that, by the way? Who
That's
are you
E. E.
quoting?
Cummings.
Okay, beautiful.
I thank you, God, for most of this amazing day. And so when I think of God and I think of love, and when I think of love, I think of God. So when I say that aspect of my that ending to my personal prayer,
Well, I can think of love, but I don't need to attach a supernatural entity to it. Why do you need to do that? Why can't you just have love, but not have God?
God is opening and upward. That image of love, let me love. What I'm imagining is some triune opening, like a bay door that has three leaves to it, opening up, and through which I can go.
He's just floundering. He's just searching. He's using all this abstract language, and it really doesn't amount to anything. God opens all the doors. God opens all the eyes. God is a place that I can go and show me the way to go. It's just this common Christian language, which really is there to sort of boost the spirit in the person. Boost the mood of the person and the hope. But it doesn't really have any reality behind it, and has really very little meaning to it.
And on the other side of that is freedom, and that has to do with love and acceptance.
That's beautiful.
God is opening and upward.
Well, you can have love and acceptance with secular humanism. Again, you don't need a God.
God is
also
opening
comes.
and upward. That's beautiful. But you said it's your spirituality is.
Well, God isn't always opening and upward, because obviously by Christian theology, God is closing out and downwards. You're going to the wrong place if you don't believe.
Is more kind of Christocentric. You focus on Jesus more. Because you said
No,
Christ.
actually, I don't think I do. I don't think I do.
Well, that's bizarre, because he started off saying that when he thinks of God, he thinks of Jesus. And now, when he's asked, when you pray, do you focus on Jesus? He's saying, no, I don't think I do. I don't think he knows I don't think that he knows really what he's doing when he's praying, or precisely what it is that he believes. He's just repeating sound bites and phrases that he's heard around in the church and in theology.
I don't think I do. I contemplate.
Yeah, you see, he's stumbling here. He's thinking. He probably doesn't even pray. That's why he's on the spot here, and he's stumbling. He's having to take time to think and make something up. He's already contradicted himself, saying, first of all, well, God, I think of Jesus. Now he's thinking when he prays, he doesn't think of Jesus.
As my mother used to say, the figure of Christ. I contemplate the figure of Christ on the crucifix. When I pray, if there's a crucifix there, I'll focus on the figure of Christ. I'm deeply moved by the passion. and the sacrifice, and his ultimate self-surrender through his love.
He's not good at talking about his beliefs and his religion at all. He really is not convincing.
I get choked up conceiving of the crucifixion.
He gets choked up. That's so touching. It's so touching.
Or his sense of betrayal.
Cry a river. Go ahead, cry. And you can't even prove that any of this happened.
Like, were you there? The gospel song, "Were you there?" It's
beautiful.
very difficult.
Yeah.
Very
Is it?
difficult. Oh, yeah. Sometimes it causes me to tremble. Is a real thing. You know.
But it's interesting when you pray. So when you pray, even though the first thing you said was Christ, when you pray, it sounds like it's more to God. Is that right?
Well, yes. Well, you said what image? Literally, the
Right.
first image I have is of early Renaissance European Christ. You know, but it's mostly to God.
Okay.
It's to God as an uncorporal love, an uncorporal love.
Do you spend a lot of time with the Gospels? Are they like in terms of?
I don't spend a lot of time with the Gospels. I mean, I have over the years. I always carry with me. I don't know it's been transferred in my new bag. Someone on a bus in Chicago. I received 2 New Testaments, Proverbs, and Psalms without expecting it when I was younger.
Okay, well now he's talking about easy stuff, about the Bibles that he carries around. I saw him really struggling to get through the question about what he sees and what he does when he prays. He really struggled to answer that question. And I don't know if he realizes he contradicted himself on that thing about God and Jesus. But in another part of the interview, I'll have to stop now, nearly 20 minutes. He's asked how he converted from atheism. Oh yeah, well he was brought up a Catholic, for goodness sake. And, he's saying, oh, I was an atheist and then I saw the light. Yeah, so he said he was on a street in Seattle or some city. Okay, he's telling the story here about how he converted.
Chicago. I received 2 New Testaments, Proverbs, and Psalms without expecting it when I was younger. One of the Gideon gave it to me on the street. I think I've told you the story before, where it was so cold I had to crack it open because it had frozen, sort of shut the humidity. I was walking down the street in Chicago, and there was just somebody. I was anxious, reaching graduate.
How old are you?
I'm 22.
Yeah.
And
So just 10 years ago.
yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And I had been picking my liver and was sort of convicted of my own atheism, and had lost my faith in God, and to my own great grief that I was.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I looked at his biography. He had a tragedy happen, which you got to feel for him. His father and brother were killed in an airplane crash when he was much younger. So it's kind of not surprising that he lost his faith.
I was sort of convinced that had been wrong all this time, that I'd been taught something that wasn't true. And I was walking down the street, and someone handed me a little green. I still have it.
Yeah, those little ones.
Little green New Testament Proverbs and Psalms, and it must have been humid and then brought out into the cold because it was frozen. You had to kind of snap it. It was really, really cold Chicago day. And I opened it up, to a little glossary in the front, and it said basically verses to read based upon if you, and it says anxiety.
Worry,
So I went to anxiety, and it was Matthew chapter 5. It was the sermon. And so I say to you, do not worry, for who among you by worrying could change a single hair on his head or how to keep it to the span of his life? And I was absolutely immediately lightened. The burden started to lift immediately, and for the first time, I understood the real meaning of the phrase, it spoke to me. Like it read off the page, like the words of Christ just read off the page. It was no effort. It was I was just carried along like a tide of the sermon. And then I stood on that street corner in the cold and read the sermon.
That's beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. So okay. So that's his conversion story. A Gideon handed him a book. It just shows the Gideons do get converts. And I've seen these books where you look at all the problems that you could be having, like stress, anxiety, loss, bereavement, etc. And then you can go to a verse in the Bible, and it will give you a couple of verses that will make you feel better. And no doubt, I'm glad it helped him. It made him feel better. But that doesn't mean that his religion's true. Okay, That's where he's failing to really get to grips with what he's experienced. He's got this emotion. He had this need. He already had the seed planted in him from when he was a child about Catholicism. He grew up in that environment. He lost his faith. His dad and brother were killed, etc. And he really needed something, and he read these words. The seed was already planted, and there it is. And it made him feel better. It lightened the load on him, but that doesn't mean his religion's true. So that's the thing. I mean, you can read inspiring words that will make you feel better, but that doesn't mean that there's any kind of supernatural reality behind them. Okay, that's all from me for now. I look forward to your comments. Goodbye.